They say you can't fight power when it wears a suit and carries lawyers. Mara Cole was about to prove them wrong, or die trying. The day the mining company came for Red Hollow, she made a choice that would split the town in two. What she didn't know was that the stranger who walked through her bakery door carried secrets darker than the coal they were digging for. This is a story about what happens when survival meets courage, when prejudice meets truth, and when two broken people decide that some things are worth the fight. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The wind came early that October morning, the kind that rattled windows and sent tumbleweeds scratching down Main Street like they were running from something. Mara Cole stood outside her bakery at 5:30 in the morning, tacking a handwritten notice to the weathered board beside her door. Her fingers were stiff from the cold, and the hammer felt heavier than it should have. Help wanted. Bakery assistant, willing to train. Simple words, desperate words. She stepped back, studying her own handwriting like it belonged to someone else. The ink had bled slightly where her pen had hesitated. Mara was 45 years old, and she'd buried her husband 3 years ago come December. Thomas had been the strong one, the one who could fix the ovens when they broke and charm the customers when money got tight. Without him, the bakery was like a body missing its spine, still standing, but barely. The street was empty except for a stray dog nosing through garbage outside the hardware store. Red Hollow. Arizona wasn't the kind of place people passed through anymore. The interstate had bypassed them 15 years back, and most folks who could leave had done exactly that. What remained was a collection of tired buildings, tired people, and a whole lot of dust. Mara pulled her cardigan tighter and turned toward her door. The glass was cracked in one corner, had been for 6 months now, and she'd covered it with duct tape that was starting to peel. Another thing she couldn't afford to fix. Another thing that made her look like she was losing the fight. She pushed inside, and the familiar smell of yeast and flour wrapped around her like an old blanket. This place was hers. Had been her grandmother's before that, and her great-grandmother's before that. 3 generations of women who knew how to turn wheat and water into something that brought people together. Lately, though, the only thing bringing people together in Red Hollow was anger. The mining company had arrived 6 months ago, Hale Extractive Industries. The name alone sounded like something that would take and never give back. They'd showed up with their lawyers and their surveys and their promises about jobs and economic revival. They'd held meetings at the community center where men in expensive suits talked about progress while women in the back rows whispered about their wells running dry. Mara had made the mistake of speaking up at one of those meetings. "What about the water?" she'd asked, standing in the middle of the crowd with her heart hammering against her ribs. "The surveys show your operation would cut right through the aquifer. What happens to our wells when you do that?" The suit at the front, Victor Hale himself, silver-haired and smooth as oil, had smiled at her like she was a child asking why the sky was blue. "Ma'am, we have environmental studies that show—" "I read your environmental studies," Mara had interrupted. "They were paid for by your company. I want to know what independent geologists say." The room had gone quiet. You could have heard a pin drop on that scuffed linoleum floor. Hale's smile had frozen in place. "I assure you we follow all state and federal regulations." "That's not what I asked." She'd sat down to scattered applause and a lot of uncomfortable silence. 3 days later, someone had spray-painted "Traitor" across her bakery window. A week after that, she'd found her delivery truck's tires slashed. The sheriff, Cal Brennan, who'd gone to school with Tommy, had written it up as vandalism and told her to keep her head down for a while. That was 2 months ago. Since then, half her regular customers had stopped coming in. The ones who still did lowered their voices when they talked to her, like being seen with Mara Cole might get them in trouble too. She couldn't afford to hire help, but she also couldn't run the bakery alone anymore. The early mornings were killing her, and she'd started making mistakes, burning batches, forgetting orders. Yesterday, she'd nearly fainted while lifting a 50-pound bag of flour, hence the sign. Mara tied her apron and fired up the ovens. The ancient gas burners coughed to life, blue flames licking across the grates. She'd start with the sourdough, 12 loaves for the lunch crowd at Pearl's diner, assuming Pearl still wanted them. Last week, Pearl had called and said maybe she'd try someone else for a while, and Mara had known exactly what that meant. She was pulling her starter from the walk-in when she heard the bell above the front door jingle. We're not open yet, she called out, not turning around. Sign says you're hiring. The voice was quiet, male, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Mara straightened and turned. The man standing in her bakery was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the kind of build that came from real work, not a gym. He wore a faded denim jacket over a dark shirt, jeans that had seen better days, and boots that had walked a lot of miles. His skin was bronze, his hair black and pulled back in a short ponytail. His face was weathered but not old, maybe late 30s, maybe 40. Hard to tell. But it was his eyes that caught her, dark brown, almost black, and watchful in a way that made her think of hawks. We open at 7, Mara said, hearing the exhaustion in her own voice. You can come back then if you want to apply. I'm here now. It wasn't rude exactly, just factual. The man stood very still, and Mara had the odd impression he was cataloging everything in the room without seeming to look at any of it directly. You got experience in a bakery? She asked. No. Food service? Some. Mara wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron. Look, I appreciate you coming by, but I need someone who knows their way around. I can lift heavy things, fix what's broken, work early mornings. He paused. I don't talk much, and I don't cause trouble. There was something in the way he said it, that last part, that made Mara look at him more carefully. This was a man who'd had to say those words before, a man who knew what trouble looked like and had learned to avoid it. What's your name? Caleb Nez. Where you from, Caleb? Around. That's not really an answer. It's the one I've got. Mara should have sent him away right then. She had enough problems without adding mysterious strangers to the list. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he stood, respectful but not submissive, present but not intrusive. Maybe it was the exhaustion that made her bones ache. Maybe it was just that she was tired of being afraid all the time. Can you start today? She heard herself ask. Yes. Pays minimum wage, cash, end of each week, 6 to 2, Monday through Saturday. Okay? I can't promise it'll last more than a month. Money's tight. Understood. Mara stuck out her hand. Caleb's handshake was firm but brief, his palm calloused. The hands of someone who worked with them. I'm Mara Cole. This is my bakery. My rules are simple. Show up on time, do what I ask, don't steal, and don't bring drama through that door. Can you manage that? Yes. All right then. She pointed toward the back. There's an apron on the hook by the walk-in. We've got 12 loaves of sourdough to shape and 100 dinner rolls to prep before 9. You ever shaped bread before? No. Well, you're about to learn. For the next 3 hours, Mara worked alongside her new employee, showing him how to shape dough, score loaves, manage oven temperatures. Caleb didn't say much, true to his word, but he watched everything she did with complete focus. When she demonstrated something once, he replicated it almost perfectly the second time. His hands were surprisingly gentle with the dough, and he learned the rhythm of the work quickly. At 8:30, her regular helper, Rosa Martinez, arrived. Rosa was 63, had worked in the bakery since Mara's grandmother ran it, and had opinions about everything. She stopped dead in the doorway when she saw Caleb. Mara, she said slowly. Who's this? New hire. Caleb Nez. Meet Rosa Martinez. Rosa, Caleb's going to be helping out for a while. Rosa's eyes narrowed. She looked Caleb up and down with the kind of assessment that missed nothing. He legal? Rosa, it's a fair question, times being what they are. Caleb met Rosa's stare without flinching. I can show you ID if you need it. Maybe I do. Rosa, that's enough, Mara said, but Caleb was already pulling a worn wallet from his back pocket. He extracted a driver's license and handed it to Rosa. She studied it for a long moment, lips pressed thin. Finally, she handed it back. Arizona license, Ford Apache. That's right. You're Apache. Yes. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Rosa turned to Mara. Can I talk to you in private? Rosa, I don't think... Please, Mara sighed. Caleb, keep an eye on the sourdough in oven 2. I'll be right back. She followed Rosa into the small office off the kitchen. Rosa closed the door and rounded on her immediately. Have you lost your mind? He needed work. I need help. Seems straightforward. Mara, you know what people are going to say. I know exactly what they're going to say. Same things they've been saying about me for 2 months now. This is different. You hire an Indian, especially now with all the trouble. What trouble? Rosa lowered her voice. You heard about the survey crews that went missing last month? The ones working for Hale's company? Mara had heard rumors. 2 men who'd been doing geological surveys up in the hills had disappeared for 3 days. When they'd finally turned up, they'd claimed they'd gotten lost. But there were stories about Apache activists running them off, about sabotage. That was never proven, Mara said. Doesn't matter if it was proven. People believe it. And now you're going to have one of them working here? Rosa shook her head. You're already on thin ice with this town. You really want to make it worse? I'm not trying to make anything worse. I'm trying to survive. Mara rubbed her temples. Look, I know you're worried, but that man out there just wants to work. That's all. You don't know what he wants. And neither do you. They stared at each other. Finally, Rosa's shoulders sagged. You're stubborn as your grandmother was. I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't meant as one. Rosa moved toward the door, then stopped. Just be careful, Mara. Please. I already lost Tommy. I don't want to lose you too. The concern in Rosa's voice was genuine, and it softened something in Mara's chest. I'll be careful, I promise. They returned to the kitchen to find Caleb exactly where they'd left him, watching the oven timer with the same focused attention he'd given everything else. The sourdough came out perfect, golden crust, singing when Mara thumped the bottom of the loaves. By noon, word had spread. Mara saw it in the way Mrs. Henderson came in for her usual Thursday order of cinnamon rolls and stared at Caleb like he was a rattlesnake coiled in the corner. In the way Frank Pritchard picked up his standing order of sandwich bread and left without his usual friendly chat. In the way people's eyes followed Caleb whenever he moved through the front of the shop. Nobody said anything directly. Not yet. But Mara could feel the weight of their judgment like humidity before a storm. At 2 o'clock, she paid Caleb his day's wages, $48 in cash. And he took it without counting it. Same time tomorrow? He asked. Same time. He nodded and left without another word. Mara watched him walk down Main Street, noting the way people on the sidewalk gave him a wide berth, like he was contagious. That night, she lay in bed in the small apartment above the bakery and wondered if she'd just made a terrible mistake. Rosa was right. She was already fighting an uphill battle, adding fuel to that fire by hiring an Apache man, of all things, when tensions were running so high. But then she remembered the way Caleb had handled the bread dough. Gentle, patient. The way he'd learned quickly and worked without complaint. The way he'd met Rosa's suspicion with quiet dignity instead of anger. She'd given him a chance, that was all. Just a chance. Surely that wasn't wrong. The brick came through her window at 3 in the morning. Mara jerked awake to the sound of shattering glass and the crash of something heavy hitting her bedroom floor. She rolled out of bed on instinct, heart hammering, and fumbled for the light switch. The brick sat in the middle of her braided rug, surrounded by glittering shards of window glass. A piece of paper was wrapped around it, secured with a rubber band. Mara's hands shook as she unwrapped it. 3 words, written in block capitals with a red marker, "Send him away." She stood there in her nightgown, barefoot on the cold floor, staring at those words until they blurred. Then she walked to her closet, pulled out a broom and dustpan, and started cleaning up the glass. She didn't call the sheriff. What would be the point? Cal Brennan had made it clear whose side he was on, and it wasn't hers. By the time the sun came up, she'd swept the glass, taped cardboard over the broken window, and made her decision. Caleb Nez showed up at 6 on the dot, just like he'd said he would. Mara met him at the door. "Someone threw a brick through my bedroom window last night." He went very still. You hurt?" "No, but there was a note, told me to send you away." "I'll leave." "I don't remember asking you to." Caleb studied her face. "This is going to get worse." "Probably." "You don't owe me anything." "No," Mara agreed, "but I owe myself something. I owe myself the right to run my business the way I see fit and hire who I want to hire without being bullied into doing otherwise. She pulled the door open wider. You coming in or not? For the first time since she'd met him, something like surprise crossed Caleb's face. It was gone in a second, but she'd seen it. Yes, ma'am. They worked through the morning routine, mixing, shaping, baking. Rosa arrived at 8:30 and saw the cardboard in Mara's window. She didn't say anything, but her mouth went tight. Around 10, Sheriff Brennan walked in. He was a big man, gone soft in the middle, with a mustache that had been fashionable about 30 years ago. He nodded at Mara, ignored Rosa completely, and fixed his attention on Caleb. You're the new hire. It wasn't a question. Caleb wiped flour from his hands and met the sheriff's stare. Yes. Cal Brennan, sheriff. He let that hang in the air. I don't believe I've seen you around Red Hollow before. I'm new. Where you staying? The motel off Route 10. The Desert Rose? That dump? Brennan's laugh was ugly. Must be desperate. It's adequate. I'm going to need to see some ID. Mara stepped forward. Cal, he's working. He's not doing anything wrong. Just a routine check, Mara, making sure we know who's in town. Brennan's smile didn't reach his eyes. Unless there's a reason you don't want to show ID. Caleb produced his driver's license again. Brennan took his time looking at it, then pulled out a small notebook and copied down the information. Every movement was deliberate, designed to intimidate. Fort Apache, Brennan said. Long way from home. Not that far. Depends on how you measure distance, I suppose. Brennan handed the license back. Let me give you some friendly advice. Red Hollow's a quiet town. We like to keep it that way. You understand what I'm saying? Yes. Good. Real good. Brennan turned to Mara. Heard you had some trouble last night. Someone threw a brick through my window. You report it? Didn't see the point. Brennan's expression hardened. That's not a smart attitude, Mara. I can't help you if you don't let me know when things happen. You didn't help me when my truck got vandalized, or when someone painted on my window. Why would this be any different? Now that's not fair. Isn't it? They stared at each other. Finally, Brennan adjusted his belt, heavy with equipment that made him look more like a soldier than a small-town cop, and moved toward the door. You two be careful, he said. These are tense times. Wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen. The threat in his voice was barely veiled. After he left, Rosa let out a breath she'd been holding. Mara, this is exactly what I was afraid of. I know. It's only going to get worse. I know that too. Caleb hadn't moved from where he stood. His face was carefully neutral, but Mara saw the tension in his shoulders. He'd been through this before, she could tell. This wasn't his first time being sized up by hostile law enforcement. You okay? She asked. Yes. You sure? Because if you need to. I'm fine. He met her eyes. Thank you. Such simple words, but the weight behind them was enormous. Mara nodded and went back to work. The lunch rush was lighter than usual. Word had definitely spread. The few customers who did come in cast nervous glances at Caleb, and two people who'd had standing weekly orders called to cancel. Mara took the calls in the back office, keeping her voice level even as her stomach twisted into tiag knots. At 1:30, a black SUV pulled up outside the bakery. Mara was at the register, counting out the meager day's take, when the door opened and Victor Hale walked in. He looked exactly like he had at the town meeting. Expensive suit, perfect hair, smile that didn't reach his eyes. Two men in cheaper suits flanked him, obviously security or lawyers or both. Mrs. Cole, Hale said warmly, like they were old friends. I hope I'm not interrupting. We're about to close. This won't take long. Hale's gaze slid past her to where Caleb stood near the ovens. His smile dimmed slightly. Perhaps we could speak privately? Anything you need to say, you can say in front of my employees. Very well. Hale clasped his hands in front of him. I've heard you've been having some trouble lately. Vandalism, harassment. I wanted to express my concern. Your concern? Of course. Red Hollow is going to be our home too, once operations begin. We want to be good neighbors, and good neighbors look out for each other. Is there a point to this? Hale's smile tightened. The point, Mrs. Cole, is that I'd like to help. These incidents you've experienced, they're regrettable. They happen when communities are under stress, when change is coming and people are afraid. Change, Mara repeated flatly. Progress, if you prefer. The mine will bring jobs, revenue, stability. But there will always be those who resist, who stir up trouble. His eyes flicked to Caleb again. Who make things harder than they need to be. Get to it, Mr. Hale. I don't have time for speeches. Fair enough. I'm prepared to make you an offer for your business. Mara went very still. My bakery isn't for sale. Everything's for sale, Mrs. Cole. It's just a matter of price. Hale gestured around the room. This is a historic building, prime real estate on Main Street. I'm prepared to offer you 3 times its assessed value. Cash. You could relocate, start fresh somewhere new, somewhere safer. No. You haven't heard my number yet. I don't need to hear it. The answer is no. Hale's veneer of friendliness cracked slightly. Mrs. Cole, I'm trying to help you. The mine is happening whether you like it or not. We have all the necessary permits, all the approvals. Fighting it is pointless. All you're doing is making yourself a target. Then I'll be a target. That's foolish. Maybe. But it's my choice to make. One of Hale's security men shifted position, and suddenly Caleb was moving. He didn't rush, didn't make any aggressive gestures, but somehow he was now standing between Mara and the 3 men, still quiet, still watchful. Hale noticed. His eyes narrowed. Is there a problem here? Caleb's voice was level. No problem, Hale said. Just a business discussion. Discussion's over, Mara said firmly. You can leave now. Hale studied them both for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost all pretense of warmth. You're making a mistake, both of you. He looked at Caleb, especially you. I know who you are, and I know why you're really here. Caleb's expression didn't change, but Mara felt the air in the room shift, like the moment before lightning strikes. You don't know anything about me, Caleb said quietly. Don't I? Caleb Nez, formerly of the Fort Apache Reservation, son of Raymond Nez, deceased, nephew of Margaret Nez, current tribal council member. Hale smiled. You think I don't do my homework? You think I don't know the Apache have been fighting my survey permits for months? And now here you are, conveniently working for the one woman in town who's made herself my biggest problem. I'm here to work. That's all. Of course you are. Hale turned back to Mara. Last chance, Mrs. Cole, take the offer, walk away before things get complicated. They're already complicated. Now get out of my bakery. Hale's jaw tightened. He nodded to his men, and they moved toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back one last time. When this goes south, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you. The door closed behind them with a soft chime of the bell. Rosa, who'd been frozen by the walk-in during the entire exchange, let out a shaky breath. Madre de Dios. Mara's legs felt weak. She gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. He knew who you were, she said to Caleb. He knew exactly who you were. Yes. Is it true? About the tribal council, the permits? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Yes. So you're not just here for work? No. Mara closed her eyes. You should have told me. If I had, would you have hired me? She didn't have an answer for that. I need to sit down, she said finally. They locked the doors and went up to Mara's apartment. It was small, living room, kitchenette, bedroom, bathroom, and Mara suddenly felt self-conscious about the threadbare furniture and the crack in the ceiling she kept meaning to fix. Caleb stood in the middle of the room like he wasn't sure he should be there. Rosa poured 3 glasses of water from the tap and handed them out. Talk, Mara said. Tell me everything. So he did. Caleb sat in the worn armchair by the window, his water glass untouched on the side table. The afternoon light cut across his face at an angle that made him look older, harder. Mara perched on the edge of her couch, Rosa beside her, both of them waiting. My father died 8 years ago, Caleb began. His voice was flat, like he was reciting facts from someone else's life. Heart attack. He was 52. My Aunt Margaret, his sister, She's been on the tribal council for 15 years. When Hale's company started filing permits for survey work 6 months ago, she was the first one to raise concerns. About the water, Mara said. About everything. The water, the land, the sacred sites they'd be digging through. Caleb's jaw tightened. Hale came to the reservation, same as he came here. Made promises, jobs for our people, revenue sharing, environmental protections. Margaret didn't buy it. She'd seen it before. Different company, same story. They take what they want and leave poison behind. Rosa shifted on the couch. So the tribe opposed the permits? Some of us did. Not everyone. Caleb's expression went dark. There are people on the res who think any job is better than no job, who think we should take what we can get. Split the council right down the middle. But Margaret kept fighting, Mara guessed. She kept fighting, got lawyers involved, filed objections, organized protests, made herself a problem. Caleb picked up his water glass, looked at it, set it back down. 2 months ago, survey crews started showing up anyway, working on land that borders the reservation, just outside the boundaries. Legal technically, but the aquifer doesn't care about property lines. The water flows where it flows. The crews that went missing, Rosa said quietly. That was your people? No. The word came out sharp. That was some young guys who thought they'd scare the crews off, send a message. Stupid kids playing at being warriors. They didn't hurt anyone, just ran them around the hills for a few days, took their equipment, made everything worse. Mara leaned forward. Worse how? Gave Hale exactly what he needed. Proof that the Apache were dangerous, unreasonable, a threat to progress. Caleb's hands curled into fists on his knees. He went to the state, to the feds, claimed he needed protection, got himself a court order allowing armed security on the work sites. Margaret tried to explain it was just a few kids acting alone, but nobody wanted to hear it. The narrative was already set. The room fell quiet, except for the ticking of the old wall clock above Mara's kitchenette. Outside, a car drove past, its engine rattling. So why are you here? Mara asked. Why Red Hollow? Caleb was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because Margaret asked me to come. She thinks Hale's going to move faster now, push harder. She wanted someone here who could watch, listen, maybe find something she could use, proof of what he's really planning. A spy, Rosa said. I prefer concerned citizen. There was no humor in Caleb's tone. I'm not doing anything illegal, just working, keeping my eyes open. Mara stood up, paced to the window. The cardboard covering her broken bedroom window was visible from here. A rectangle of brown against the white frame. You used me. The job was just cover. At first, yes. Caleb met her eyes when she turned around. But I do the work. I earn what you pay me. That part's real. That part, Mara repeated bitterly. I didn't throw that brick through your window. I didn't vandalize your truck or threaten you. Those people did that all on their own because you spoke up. Caleb stood, and the small room suddenly felt smaller. You were already a target before I walked through your door. All I did was show up to work. And make it worse. Maybe. Probably. He didn't look away. But I also fixed your oven yesterday when the igniter started failing. And I moved those 100-pound flour sacks you were killing yourself trying to lift. And I'm here now, telling you the truth, when I could have just walked away and let you think I was exactly what you wanted me to be. Some drifter looking for day work. Rosa stood too. This is too much. This is danger we don't need. You think we're not already in danger? Mara heard her voice rising and fought to control it. Hale just walked in here and threatened us. The sheriff's in his pocket. Half the town won't do business with me anymore because I asked questions at a public meeting. It's already too much, Rosa. It was too much before Caleb showed up. So you're just going to let him stay? Keep working here? Make yourself even more of a target? Mara looked at Caleb. He stood very still, watching her, waiting for her judgment. She thought about the way he'd stepped between her and Hale's men, the quiet competence he'd shown in the kitchen, the fact that he'd just told her the truth when lying would have been easier. I don't know yet, she said honestly. I need to think. Caleb nodded. Fair enough. I'll come back tomorrow morning. If you don't want me here, just lock the door. I'll understand. He left without another word. Mara listened to his footsteps on the stairs, the sound of the back door closing behind him. Rosa sat back down heavily. "You're going to let him stay." "I said I need to think." "Mara." "What do you want me to do, Rosa? Fire him because he has family who's fighting the same fight I'm fighting? Turn him away because other people are bigots?" "I want you to be safe. I want you to survive this." "I'm not sure those are options anymore." That night, Mara didn't sleep. She lay in her bed with the cardboard window rattling in the wind and thought about choices. About the bakery her grandmother had built with her own hands. About Tommy, who'd loved this place as much as she did. About the way Victor Hale's smile had never touched his eyes. About the fact that she was 45 years old and had already buried one dream when Tommy died, and she'd be damned if she'd bury another without a fight. At 5:30 the next morning, she went downstairs and unlocked the door. Caleb arrived at 6 on the dot. He saw the open door, saw her standing in the kitchen with flour already on her apron, and something in his shoulders relaxed. "Same rules as before," Mara said. "Show up on time, do the work, no drama." "Yes, ma'am." "And no more secrets. If something's happening that I should know about, you tell me. Understood?" "Understood." They worked in silence for the first hour, falling into the rhythm they'd established over the past 2 days. Rosa arrived at 8:30, took one look at them, and sighed. "I hope you know what you're doing," she muttered to Mara. "I really don't," Mara admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." The day passed without incident, though Mara noticed even fewer customers than the day before. Pearl didn't call with her usual lunch order. The mechanic from down the street who always bought a coffee and a bear claw every morning didn't show up. By noon, they'd sold exactly $17 worth of baked goods. Mara did the math in her head and felt her stomach drop. At this rate, she'd be out of business in 6 weeks, maybe less. That afternoon, after they'd closed up, Caleb lingered by the back door. "Something on your mind?" Mara asked. "You're losing money because of me." "I'm losing money because people in this town are cowards." Same result either way. Mara wiped down the counter, not looking at him. "You planning on quitting on me?" "No, but I'd understand if you needed me to." "Well, I don't, so stop bringing it up." She threw the rag in the sink harder than necessary. "Besides, I've got a plan." "What kind of plan?" "The kind where I stop waiting for customers to come to me." Mara pulled off her apron. "Tomorrow's Saturday. There's a farmer's market in the square. I'm going to set up a booth, sell direct. People can avoid this store, but they can't avoid me if I'm right there in the middle of everything." Caleb considered this. "That's going to make some people angry." "Good. I'm tired of being the only one who's angry." The farmer's market opened at 7. Mara and Caleb loaded up her truck, the one with the replaced tires, at 5:30 in the morning. Bread, rolls, pastries, muffins, everything she'd been making all week with no one to sell it to. Rosa had offered to help, but Mara had told her to stay home. No point in all of them painting targets on their backs. The market square was in the center of Red Hollow, a patch of cracked asphalt surrounded by the few buildings that were still occupied. Vendor stalls were already being set up, produce, crafts, preserves. People Mara had known her whole life. She pulled into an empty spot and started unloading. "Mara Cole," a voice called out. "Didn't expect to see you here." Tom Hendricks ran the produce stand 2 spots over. He'd gone to high school with Tommy, used to come by the bakery every week for sourdough. Hadn't been in for a month. "Morning, Tom," Mara said evenly. Tom's eyes slid to Caleb, who was lifting boxes out of the truck bed like they weighed nothing. "I see you brought help." "I did." "That the Indian everyone's talking about?" "His name is Caleb." Tom's face hardened. "Mara, I'm going to give you some advice because I like Tommy. You need to let that one go and find yourself some regular help. People don't like it." "People can get over it." "Can they? Or can they just decide to buy their bread somewhere else?" Mara set down the box she was holding and turned to face Tom fully. "Is that a threat?" "It's reality. You want to make this about principles? Fine. But principles don't pay the bills." "Neither does cowardice." Tom's face went red. "You watch your mouth." "Or what? You'll stop shopping at my store? Already happened. You'll tell people not to buy from me. Already happening." Mara stepped closer. "I've got nothing left to lose, Tom. So you can take your advice and—" "Everything all right here?" Sheriff Brennan walked up, thumbs hooked in his belt. Behind him, two of Hale's security men stood with their arms crossed. Just fine, Mara said. Didn't sound fine. Brennan looked at the stall Mara was setting up. You got a permit for this? It's a farmer's market, Cal. I don't need a permit. Actually, for commercial food sales, you do. Health department regulation. He smiled without warmth. I'm going to need to see your paperwork. Mara's heart sank. She had her business license, her health department certification for the bakery itself. But she'd never thought she'd need additional permits for a farmer's market. I don't have it with me. Then I can't let you sell here. Brennan gestured to the table she'd been setting up. Pack it up. Cal, come on. I've been selling at this market for 3 years, and you've always had the proper permits before. Times change. Rules get enforced. He nodded toward Caleb. Especially when there's concerns about who's handling the food. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Mara felt rage building in her chest, hot and dangerous. That's racist bullshit, and you know it. Watch yourself, Mara. Or what? You'll arrest me for calling you what you are? Brennan's hand moved to his belt, resting on his handcuffs. You're creating a public disturbance. I'm standing in a public square trying to sell bread. Without the proper permits, that's a violation. Brennan stepped closer. Now you can pack up and go home, or you can keep running your mouth and I'll cite you for operating without a license. Your choice. Mara looked around. The other vendors were watching, but none of them were meeting her eyes. Tom had backed away from his own stall. Even the people who'd just been walking through the market had stopped to stare. No one was going to help her. They were all too afraid. Pack it up, Brennan said again. Caleb touched her elbow gently. It's not worth it. He was right. She knew he was right. Getting arrested wouldn't help anything, but the unfairness of it burned like acid in her throat. Fine, she said. They loaded everything back into the truck in silence while people watched. Mara's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped a whole tray of muffins. Caleb caught them before they hit the ground. As they pulled away from the square, Mara saw Hale's security men talking to Brennan, saw the sheriff nod, saw them all share a laugh about something. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, she said. Caleb drove, his face grim. They don't need to. They've already won. No, they haven't. Mara, they haven't won. Not yet. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. That afternoon, vandals hit the bakery again. Mara had gone upstairs to lie down. The humiliation and anger had given her a splitting headache when she heard glass breaking. She ran downstairs to find the front window shattered, a rock sitting in the middle of the floor. No note this time. The message was clear enough without one. She called Caleb. He arrived 15 minutes later with plywood and tools. Where'd you get this? She asked. Hardware store on Route 10, different town. They boarded up the window together as the sun set. Rosa showed up with her husband Manuel, a quiet man who worked maintenance at the elementary school. He helped without saying much, just held the board steady while Caleb hammered. When they finished, the bakery looked like a fortress, or a tomb. I have some money saved, Rosa said quietly. Not much, but no. Mara's voice came out harsher than she intended. No, Rosa, I'm not taking your money. Then what are you going to do? Mara looked at the boarded-up windows, the empty shop, the register that hadn't rung all day. I don't know. Manuel cleared his throat. You could sell, take Hale's offer, start over somewhere else. Manuel, Rosa hissed, I'm just saying, sometimes you have to know when to fold. I'm not folding. Then you're going to lose everything. Maybe, Mara met his eyes, but at least I'll lose it on my terms. After Rosa and Manuel left, Caleb stayed. He cleaned up the broken glass while Mara sat at one of the tables. Too tired to move. You should go, she said. It's late. I will. In a minute. He finished sweeping and leaned the broom against the wall. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why are you really doing this? Fighting Hale, I mean. The water issue, the mine. It doesn't directly affect your bakery. You could have stayed quiet, kept your head down. Mara was quiet for a long time. You ever been married? The question seemed to catch him off guard. No. Tommy and we bought this place from my grandmother when we got married. Spent 5 years fixing it up, building the business. He used to joke that the bakery was our first kid. She smiled, but it hurt. Then he got sick, pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, there was nothing they could do. He died 6 months later. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. That's what they say. But you know what Tommy told me before he died? He said, don't let them take it. Whatever happens, don't let them take what we built. He made me promise. So this is about him? No. Mara shook her head. It's about me. Tommy's gone. The promise I made him, that's gone too, because he's not here to hold me to it. I could sell this place tomorrow and he'd never know, but I would know. She looked around the empty bakery. This is the only thing I have left that's mine. The only choice that's mine to make. And I choose to fight. Caleb sat down across from her. Even if you can't win? Especially then. They sat in silence while night fell outside. Finally, Caleb spoke. There's something you should know about why Margaret really sent me here. I thought you told me everything. Most of it, not all. He took a breath. The aquifer Hale wants to drill through? It doesn't just feed Red Hollow's wells, it feeds the San Carlos River, which runs right through the reservation. If the mine goes through the way Hale's planned it, it'll poison everything downstream. Our water, our land, everything. So this isn't just about stopping a mine, it's about survival. For both of us, yes. Mara processed this. What does Margaret want you to find? Proof that Hale knows the environmental impact reports are wrong. Proof that he's planning to cut corners, dump waste where he shouldn't. Something concrete that we can take to the EPA, the state regulators. Something they can't ignore. And have you found anything? Not yet, but I'm close. I've been watching the survey crews, listening to what people say when they think nobody's paying attention. There's a geologist on Hale's team who doesn't agree with the official reports. I've seen him arguing with the project manager. Caleb leaned forward. If I could get him alone, maybe get him to talk. That's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. You figured that out by now. Mara had. What do you need from me? Nothing. I'm not asking you to... Caleb, what do you need? He studied her face. Time, mostly. And maybe someone who can ask questions without people getting suspicious. You've lived here your whole life. People know you. If you started asking around about the mine, about the workers, about what's really happening up there, they'd talk to me. Maybe. Maybe. Mara thought about Brennan's face at the farmer's market, about Hale's smile in her bakery, about the brick through her window and the rock through her glass and the way half the town had turned their backs on her. All right, she said. I'll help. Over the next week, the bakery became something else. The front remained closed. There weren't enough customers to justify opening, but the back turned into a war room. Mara made calls to old friends, people who'd worked at the mine sites in the past, anyone who might know something useful. Caleb disappeared for hours at a time, coming back with bits of information, pieces of a puzzle they were slowly assembling. Rosa kept the books and managed supplies. She didn't like what they were doing, but she showed up every day anyway, loyal to the end. They learned that Hale was pushing to break ground early, before the next round of environmental reviews, that he'd been making payments to local politicians, legal contributions that bought silence, that the geologist Caleb had mentioned, Dr. Sarah Chen, had submitted 2 different reports, and only one had been made public. The question is, where's the other report? Mara said one night. They were sitting around the prep table, papers spread out between them. If we could get our hands on it, we'd have something. Caleb circled a name on one of the documents. Chen's assistant, guy named Marcus Webb. He might know where she keeps her files. How do we get to him? He drinks at Murphy's bar, every Thursday night. Mara looked at the calendar. That's tomorrow. Yes. You can't go. He'll recognize you. I know. Caleb looked at her. But he doesn't know you. You want me to go to a bar and interrogate a geologist's assistant? I want you to buy him a drink and ask some questions, that's all. Rosa made a sound of disgust. This is insane. Probably, Mara agreed, but we're doing it anyway. Murphy's bar was exactly the kind of place Mara never went to. Dark, loud, smelling of stale beer and bad decisions. She sat at the bar in jeans and a sweater, feeling completely out of place, nursing a beer she didn't want. Marcus Webb was easy to spot. Caleb had described him, late 20s, sandy hairs, always wore a company jacket with the Hale logo on the back. He was sitting at a table with two other guys, all of them in work clothes. Mara waited until he got up to order another round. She timed it so she was at the bar beside him. "Busy night," she said. He glanced at her. "Yeah." "You work for the mining company?" "How'd you know?" She nodded at his jacket. "Lucky guess." He smiled, warming up. "Yeah, I'm with Hale Extractive. Geological surveying." "That sounds interesting." "It's all right." "Pays the bills." Mara signaled the bartender for another beer. "Let me buy you a drink. I've been curious about the mine, what it's going to mean for the town." Marcus's smile faltered slightly. "You live in Red Hollow?" "All my life." "Oh." He looked uncomfortable. "Well, it's going to be good. Jobs, money, good for everyone." "Is it, though? I've heard some people have concerns about the water." "Yeah, well," Marcus shifted his weight. "That's all been addressed. Environmental impact studies, safety protocols, it's all above board." "I heard there were some disagreements about those studies." Now Marcus looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Who told you that?" "Just rumors. You know how small towns are." Mara kept her voice light, curious rather than accusatory. "I figured someone who actually works on the project would know the truth." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The bartender brought his beers and Mara paid for them. Marcus picked them up, but didn't move away. "Look," he said quietly. "I probably shouldn't say anything, but the studies are solid. We followed every regulation. It's just, there were some preliminary findings that raised questions, and Dr. Chen wanted to do additional testing, but the timeline didn't allow for it." "What kind of questions?" "About the aquifer structure, the porosity of the rock layers." Marcus was talking faster now, the words spilling out like he'd been holding them in for too long. "Chen thought there was a risk of fracture propagation if we drilled where the current plans show. She wanted to move the primary shaft 300 yards west, but that would have cost millions in redesign." "So what happened?" "Management overruled her, said the risk was acceptable." Marcus lowered his voice even further. "She submitted a revised report recommending the design change. It was rejected. The original report is what went to the state." Mara's pulse quickened. "There are two reports?" Marcus realized he'd said too much. "I didn't say that, but there are. I have to go." He started to move away. "Wait, just tell me one thing. Where would she keep something like that? The revised report?" Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw him make a choice. "If it exists, and I'm not saying it does, someone like Dr. Chen would keep a copy, for her own protection, probably backed up on a personal drive, maybe at her office." "Where's her office?" But Marcus was already walking away, back to his friends. He didn't look at her again. Mara left the bar and found Caleb waiting in her truck 2 blocks away. "Well?" he asked. She told him everything. By the time she finished, Caleb was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles had gone white. "2 reports," he said. "She submitted 2 reports, and they buried the one that showed the danger. Oh, we need that second report. Her office will be locked, probably secured. So we find another way in." Caleb turned to look at her. "You know what you're suggesting?" "I know exactly what I'm suggesting." They sat in the truck while the engine ticked, cooling in the night air. Finally, Caleb spoke. "There's someone who might be able to help, but you're not going to like it." "At this point, I'm open to anything. My cousin, Danny, he's one of the kids who ran off those survey crews." Mara closed her eyes. "Perfect. He knows the mine site, knows security patterns, and he's good at getting into places he shouldn't be. He's also wanted for harassment." They never pressed charges. Hale didn't want the publicity. Caleb started the truck. "I'll talk to him, see if he's willing." 3 days later, Mara found herself driving 2 hours north to meet a 19-year-old Apache kid in a diner parking lot. Danny Nez looked like a younger version of Caleb. Same build, same watchful eyes, but with an edge of recklessness that made Mara nervous. "You're the bakery lady," he said. "That's me." Caleb says you need help breaking into an office. I need help getting information that belongs to the public but is being hidden by a corporation. There's a difference. Danny grinned. Not much of one. They sat in Mara's truck and went over the plan. Dr. Chen's office was in a temporary building at the mine site. A glorified trailer, really. Security was light during the day when workers were around, heavier at night when the site was empty. Best time would be shift change, Danny said. 7 in the morning or 7 at night. Lots of movement, guards distracted. Cameras are on a rotation, 45 seconds between sweeps on the north side. That's your window. How do you know all this? Danny's grin widened. I've been watching. Of course you have. They decided on the morning shift change. Less suspicious if someone saw them. They could claim to be workers showing up early. Caleb would drive. Danny would handle any locks. Mara would go in and find the report. Why you? Caleb had asked when she'd insisted on this part. Because if we get caught, they'll go easier on a middle-aged white woman than they will on you two. That's just the truth. Neither of them could argue with that. The morning of the break-in, Mara woke up at 4 feeling like she might throw up. She dressed in dark clothes, pulled her hair back, and tried not to think about what would happen if this went wrong. Caleb picked her up at 5. Danny was already in the back seat. They drove north in silence, watching the sun come up over the desert. The mine site appeared on the horizon like a wound in the earth. Massive machinery, gouged ground, roads cut into hillsides. At 6:50, they pulled into the lot designated for construction workers. Around them, other trucks were arriving, men in hard hats and work boots heading toward the site office to clock in. 7 minutes, Danny said, watching his phone. Guard rotation happens at 7 sharp. Mara's hands were sweating. She wiped them on her jeans. You don't have to do this, Caleb said. Yes, I do. At 7, chaos erupted as the night shift ended and day shift began. Workers flooded the lot, heading to and from their vehicles. In the confusion, Mara slipped out of the truck and walked toward the row of office trailers like she had every right to be there. Dr. Chen's office was the 3rd trailer from the end. Mara climbed the steps and tried the door. Locked. She looked around. No one was watching. She tapped her phone, the signal to Danny. He appeared 30 seconds later, tools in hand. 40 seconds after that, the door swung open. You've got 5 minutes, he whispered. Then the cameras swing back around. Mara stepped inside. The office was cramped, papers everywhere, a laptop closed on the desk. She started with the filing cabinets, fingers flying through folders. Personnel files, survey data, core samples, environmental. There. A folder labeled Aquifer Study, Preliminary. Inside were 2 reports. Both had Dr. Chen's name on them. Both covered the same geological survey. But the conclusions were completely different. One said the drilling plan was safe within acceptable parameters. The other, the one that hadn't been made public, said there was a 70% chance of aquifer contamination if they proceeded as planned. Mara pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. Page after page, hands shaking, checking the time every few seconds. 3 minutes left. She heard voices outside, men talking, getting closer. 2 minutes. Her phone chimed, battery at 10%. She swore under her breath and kept photographing. 1 minute. The voices were right outside the trailer. Mara shoved the reports back in the folder, back in the filing cabinet. She looked around frantically. No back door. Only one way out. She heard a key in the lock. The door swung open and Dr. Sarah Chen stood there, staring at Mara in complete shock. For a frozen second, neither of them moved. Then Chen's eyes dropped to Mara's phone, still in her hand, and understanding flooded her face. I can explain, Mara started. Get out. Chen's voice was low, urgent. Right now, before security sees you. Go! Mara went. She pushed past Chen down the stairs, walking fast but not running. Behind her, she heard Chen step into her office and close the door. Danny materialized from between 2 trailers. This way, quick. They cut through a gap in the fence, circled around to where Caleb was waiting. Mara dove into the truck and they pulled out of the lot, merging with the departing night shift workers. No one followed. They drove for 20 minutes in silence before Caleb finally spoke. Did you get it? Mara checked her phone. 27 photographs, every page of that second report. Yeah, she said, I got it. She also had the image of Dr. Chen's face burned into her memory. The shock, yes, but also something else. Something that looked almost like relief. They printed the photographs that afternoon at a copy shop 3 towns over, somewhere nobody would recognize them. Mara stood at the counter watching page after page emerge from the printer, each one documenting Hale's deliberate deception. Dr. Chen's revised report was damning, charts showing fracture patterns in the aquifer, calculations projecting a 73% probability of contamination, handwritten notes in the margins that grew increasingly urgent as the pages went on. This is it, Danny said, looking over her shoulder. This is what we needed. But Caleb was frowning. It's what Margaret needed. Question is, what do we do with it now? They took the documents back to the bakery and spread them across the prep table. Rosa came in through the back door, took one look at their faces, and locked the door behind her. You did something stupid, didn't you? Define stupid, Mara said. Anything that involves the police, jail time, or getting shot, then we're probably fine. Rosa sat down heavily. Tell me. So they told her. About the break-in, about Dr. Chen, about the reports. When they finished, Rosa was quiet for a long time. You have proof, she said finally. Real proof that Hale knowingly submitted false information to the state. Yes. So we take it to the authorities. The EPA, the State Environmental Board, someone who can stop this. Caleb shook his head. We take it to the authorities, and Hale's lawyers will bury it in paperwork for months, maybe years. By the time anyone acts, the mine will already be operational. You can't unfracture an aquifer. Then what? Rosa spread her hands. What's the point of having proof if we can't use it? Mara had been thinking about this since they'd left the mine site. We use it, just not the way you're thinking. I don't like the sound of that. There's a town meeting scheduled for next week. County supervisor's supposed to give an update on the mine project, answer questions from residents. It's open to the public. Danny caught on first. You want to go public, show everyone what Hale's been hiding. I want to show them the truth, let them decide what to do with it. That's insane, Rosa said. Hale will destroy you. He'll sue for libel, theft, breaking and entering. Let him try. These are his own reports, his own geologist's findings. All I'm doing is making sure people see what he doesn't want them to see. Caleb was watching her carefully. This will make you the center of everything. Every bit of anger, every bit of fear in this town. It'll all land on you. It already has. Not like this. This is different. This is declaring war. Mara looked at the documents spread across the table, thought about the boarded-up windows of her bakery, about Tommy's voice telling her not to let them take what they'd built, about the choice she'd made weeks ago to fight instead of fold. Then we declare war. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Margaret Nez drove down from the reservation, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed every page of the report, asked questions that Mara couldn't always answer, and finally nodded. This is solid. Chen knew exactly what she was documenting. She built a case. So why didn't she go public herself? Mara asked. Margaret's smile was bitter. Because she has a career to protect, a reputation. Going against Hale would have meant losing both. Some fights, you need someone with nothing left to lose. That's me, I guess. That's both of us. Margaret sat back. The tribal council is split on how to handle this. Half of them think we should work through official channels, be patient, trust the system. The other half knows the system's rigged against us, has been for 150 years. Which half are you? I stopped trusting the system the day they built a dam that flooded our sacred sites and called it progress. Margaret's voice was hard. So yes, I support what you're doing, and I'll stand with you at that town meeting, but you need to understand what you're walking into. Hale's not just going to accept this. He'll fight back, and he fights dirty. I know. Do you? Because I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've seen what men like him are capable of. Intimidation, violence, making people disappear into legal nightmares. He's got money, power, and he's not afraid to use either. Mara thought about the brick through her window, the vandalized truck, the farmer's market humiliation. I've already seen some of what he can do. That was him being subtle. Margaret leaned forward. What comes next won't be. They spent the evening planning. Margaret would bring representatives from the tribal council, the ones who were willing to show up. Mara would present the reports. Caleb would provide testimony about what he'd witnessed at the mine site. They'd make copies of everything, distribute them to anyone who wanted to see. We need to control the narrative, Margaret said. Tell the story before Hale can spin it. That means we need people on our side before we walk into that meeting. I don't have people on my side, Mara said. Half the town won't talk to me. Then we find the other half. Over the next 2 days, Mara and Caleb went door to door. Not to everyone, they were strategic about it. The families who drew their water from wells, who had kids they worried about, the ranchers whose land bordered the mine site, the people who'd lived in Red Hollow long enough to remember when the last mining company had come through, made promises, and left pollution behind. Some doors slammed in their faces, but some stayed open. Tom Hendricks listened to them on his front porch, arms crossed, face skeptical. When Mara showed him the projections in Dr. Chen's report, the models showing how contamination would spread through the aquifer, his expression shifted. This says our wells would be affected within 18 months. That's what the science shows. Hale's people said there was no risk. Hale's people lied. Tom stared at the documents for a long time. Finally, he looked up. What do you need from me? Come to the meeting. Listen. Ask questions. Don't let them shut down the conversation. That's all? That's everything. They had similar conversations across town. Some people were convinced, others weren't. But by the night before the meeting, Mara had commitments from maybe 20 residents to show up and hear them out. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had a week ago. The night before the meeting, Mara couldn't sleep. She sat in her apartment looking at the photographs of the reports and felt the weight of what she was about to do. This wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't even just about the bakery. She was about to stand up in front of her entire town and call out the most powerful man in the county. Either people would listen or they wouldn't. Either this would matter or it wouldn't. Around midnight, someone knocked on her door. Mara froze. Nobody came by at midnight with good news. She crept to the door. Who is it? Dr. Chen. Mara opened the door. The geologist stood in the hallway wearing jeans and a jacket, looking exhausted. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying or hadn't slept in days. Can I come in? Mara stepped back. Chen walked into the apartment and stood in the middle of the living room, hands in her pockets. I know what you're planning, she said. The town meeting tomorrow. You're going to present my revised report. How did you... I'm not an idiot. You broke into my office, photographed my files. What else would you do with them? Chen's voice was flat. I should turn you in. Breaking and entering, theft of proprietary documents. I could have you arrested. Then why are you here instead of calling the police? Chen sat down on Mara's couch without being invited. Because I've been asking myself that question for 3 months. Why I didn't go public. Why I let them bury my findings. Why I kept my mouth shut when I knew that what they were planning would poison the water for thousands of people. You were protecting your career. I was protecting my cowardice. Chen's laugh was bitter. I told myself it was about being professional, about working within the system, but really, I was just afraid. Afraid of losing my job, my reputation. Afraid of what it would cost me to stand up. Mara sat down across from her. So what changed? You did. You and that Apache man who works for you. You're willing to lose everything for this. And I'm sitting in my office pretending I don't know that people are going to get hurt because I was too scared to do the right thing. Chen pulled an envelope from her jacket. So I'm doing it now. Here. Mara took the envelope. Inside was a flash drive. What's this? Everything. All my raw data, my calculations, my correspondence with Hale's management team. Emails where they explicitly told me to revise my findings or be replaced. Documented proof that they knew the risks and buried them. Chen met Mara's eyes. You want to make a case against Hale? That's your ammunition. Why give this to me? Why not present it yourself? Because I'm not brave like you. I can give you the evidence, but I can't stand up there and deliver it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Chen stood. But I can at least make sure the truth gets out. What you do with it is up to you. She was at the door when Mara called after her. Dr. Chen, thank you. Chen paused. Don't thank me. I should have done this months ago. People like me, we're the reason men like Hale get away with what they do. We know better, but we stay quiet because it's easier. She pulled her jacket tighter. I hope you make them listen tomorrow. I really do. After she left, Mara sat with the flash drive in her hands, feeling its weight. This was more than she'd hoped for. This was everything. She called Caleb. He answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the late hour. We've got more, she said, and told him about Chen's visit. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. This changes things. How? It means we can't just show the reports anymore. We have to show the cover-up, the deliberate deception. It makes Hale look worse, but it also makes this more dangerous. I know. Mara, if we present this tomorrow, he's going to come after you with everything he has. Legal action, intimidation, maybe worse. Let him come. I'm serious. So am I. Mara stood, paced to her window. Caleb, I've spent 3 years being afraid. Afraid of losing the bakery, afraid of being alone, afraid of making the wrong choice. I'm tired of being afraid. For once in my life, I want to do something that matters, even if it costs me. It might cost you everything. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. But at least I'll have tried. The morning of the town meeting, Mara woke to find her bakery surrounded, not by protesters or vandals this time, by people from the reservation. 24 Apache men and women standing in a loose circle around the building, arms crossed, faces calm. Margaret was among them, along with Danny and several others Mara didn't recognize. She went downstairs and found Caleb already there, talking quietly with his aunt. What's going on? Margaret turned. We heard there might be trouble today. Thought you could use some witnesses. Witnesses to what? Whatever Hale tries. Margaret's smile was grim. He's not used to people standing up to him, especially not women, especially not in front of the whole town. Men like that, they don't react well when their control gets threatened. So you're what, bodyguards? We're community members exercising our right to peacefully assemble on a public street. If that happens to make it harder for anyone to try something stupid, well, Margaret shrugged. That's just a happy accident. Mara looked at the circle of people, at their determined faces, and felt something crack open in her chest. She'd been alone for so long, fighting alone, grieving alone, barely surviving alone, and now, somehow, she wasn't. Thank you, she said quietly. The meeting was scheduled for 7 at the community center. Mara, Caleb, and Margaret arrived at 6:30 to find the parking lot already full. People were streaming in through the doors, more people than Mara had seen gathered in one place since Tommy's funeral. Inside, the center was packed. Every chair was taken, people standing along the walls. Mara saw faces she recognized, faces she didn't. Townspeople and reservation residents, sitting in separate sections like oil and water, not mixing but both present. Sheriff Brennan was there with 2 deputies. Hale's security team lined the back wall. And sitting in the front row, perfectly composed in an expensive suit, was Victor Hale himself. The county supervisor, a nervous-looking man named Bob Priestley, took the podium at 7 sharp. Thank you all for coming. I know there's been a lot of talk about the mining project, so I thought it would be good to have an open forum where we can address concerns and provide factual information. He shuffled his papers. Mr. Hale has graciously agreed to give us an update on the project timeline and answer questions. Hale stood, smiled at the crowd, and launched into what was clearly a prepared speech. Jobs, economic development, environmental safeguards, community investment. The same words he'd been saying for months, polished and smooth. Mara listened to him talk and felt her anger building. He was so confident, so sure that everyone would just accept his version of reality. When he finished, Priestley asked if there were questions. Mara stood. Mrs. Cole, Priestley said, and his voice held a warning. Please keep your comments constructive. I'll do my best. Mara moved to the center aisle so everyone could see her. Mr. Hale, you've talked a lot about environmental safeguards. Can you tell us about Dr. Sarah Chen's revised geological report? Hale's smile didn't waver. I'm not sure what you're referring to. The report where she documented a 73% probability of aquifer contamination if you drill according to your current plans, the one you rejected in favor of a less thorough assessment. The room went very quiet. Hale's smile tightened. Mrs. Cole, I think you've been misinformed. All of our geological assessments have been thorough and have followed proper scientific protocols. Really? Mara pulled out her phone, held it up. Because I have photographs of both reports right here, the one you submitted to the state and the one you buried. Would you like me to share them with everyone? Priestley stood. Now, hold on. I'd like to hear this, Tom Hendricks called from the middle of the room. If there's two reports, we should see both. Other voices joined in. People Mara had talked to over the past few days, people who'd agreed to ask questions. The crowd was shifting, attention moving away from Hale and toward her. This is highly irregular, Hale said, standing. Those documents, if they even exist, are proprietary company information. Presenting them here would be what? Informing the public about risks to their water supply? Mara's voice rose. You stood up here and told us there was no danger. You looked us in the eye and lied. That's defamation. It's documentation. Caleb stood, holding up a folder. We have the reports. We have the emails where your management team told Dr. Chen to revise her findings. We have everything. Hale's face went red. Where did you get those? Those are private company files. If you illegally obtained, are you saying they're real? Margaret stood now too, her voice cutting through the noise. Because if they're real, then you just admitted you knowingly submitted false information to state regulators. That's a felony, Mr. Hale. The room erupted. People shouting questions, Priestley banging his gavel, Brennan moving toward the center aisle. But Margaret kept talking, her voice rising above the chaos. The tribal council has been fighting your permits for 6 months. You've called us obstructionists, radicals, people who don't understand progress. But we understand perfectly. We understand that you plan to poison our water and our land because it's cheaper than doing it right. We understand that you've been lying to everyone in this room about the risks. And we understand that if we don't stop you now, there won't be anything left to save. More voices joined hers, people from the reservation standing, adding their own stories, about other mines, other promises, other companies that had left devastation behind. Hale was shouting now, but nobody was listening to him anymore. The narrative had shifted. The control he'd maintained for months was slipping through his fingers. Order! Priestley was banging his gavel so hard it cracked. We need order! That's when Mara saw them. 2 of Hale's security men slipping out the side door, moving with purpose, not like they were leaving, but like they were going to do something. She caught Caleb's eye, nodded toward the door. He saw them too. We need to go outside, he said quietly. What? No, we're finally getting through to people. Mara, now. Something in his voice made her move. They pushed through the crowd toward the side entrance. Margaret saw them leaving and followed. Outside, the parking lot was darker than it should have been. Someone had broken the overhead lights. And in that darkness, Mara could see movement. The security men were near her truck, doing something to it. Hey, Caleb shouted. Get away from there. The men straightened. One of them had something in his hand, a small package, wires visible even in the dim light. Oh no, Margaret breathed. The explosion would have killed anyone inside the truck. Instead, it just destroyed the vehicle, the blast shattering windows across the parking lot and sending everyone in the community center running outside. Mara stood frozen, watching her truck burn, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had just tried to kill her, or frame someone for trying to kill her, or both. People were screaming, running. Brennan was shouting into his radio, and Hale's security men were trying to disappear into the crowd. But Danny and 3 other young Apache men were faster. They grabbed the security guys, forced them to the ground. One of them still had the detonator in his hand. Sheriff, Danny shouted. Sheriff, these men just blew up that truck. Brennan ran over, saw the detonator, saw the wires. His face went white. What the hell? Ask Hale, Margaret said coldly. Ask him why his employees just tried to murder someone at a public meeting. Hale was already moving toward his car, trying to slip away in the chaos. But people blocked his path, Tom Hendricks and a dozen others, forming a wall of bodies between Hale and his escape. "You're not going anywhere," Tom said. The next hour was chaos. State police arrived, then federal agents. Someone had called the EPA, the FBI, everyone they could think of. The flash drive Chen had given Mara ended up in the hands of a federal investigator. The security men who'd planted the bomb were arrested, and when they were offered deals to testify, they gave up Hale within minutes. He'd ordered it. The bomb wasn't meant to kill, it was meant to frame the Apache activists, make it look like they'd gotten violent, discredit the opposition. But the men he'd hired had gotten sloppy, gotten caught, and now everything was unraveling. Mara sat on the curb watching her truck burn and felt oddly detached from it all. Caleb sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You okay?" he asked. "Someone just tried to blow me up." "Technically, they tried to blow up your truck." "That's not actually comforting." "No, I suppose it's not." They sat in silence while emergency vehicles flashed red and blue around them. Finally, Mara spoke. "We did it, didn't we? We actually stopped him." "Maybe, probably. The investigation alone will tie up his permits for months, maybe years." Caleb looked at the burning truck. "But this isn't over. Hale's got lawyers, money. Even if he goes down, the company might push forward with different leadership." "One fight at a time." "One fight at a time," Caleb agreed. Margaret came over, sat down on Mara's other side. "The FBI wants statements from all of us. You up for that tonight, or should I tell them tomorrow?" "Tonight. Get it done." Mara looked at the older woman. "Thank you for standing with me." "Thank you for standing first. That's always the hardest part." People were starting to come over. Tom Hendricks looking shaken, a woman named Linda Vasquez who ran the feed store. Others Mara recognized from around town. They didn't say much, a hand on her shoulder, a quiet word of support. But they came. After months of silence, they came. Around midnight, after she'd given her statement to 3 different law enforcement agencies, and her voice was hoarse from talking, Mara finally went home. The apartment above the bakery felt different somehow, smaller, or maybe she felt bigger. Rosa was waiting for her with coffee and tears. "I saw it on the news," Rosa said, pulling Mara into a hug. "I saw the explosion, and I thought, I'm okay. I'm fine. You're not fine. You almost died." "But I didn't." Mara hugged her back. "I'm here. We're okay." They sat up until dawn, Rosa fussing and Mara reassuring, until finally exhaustion won and they both dozed off on the couch. When Mara woke, the sun was streaming through the windows and someone was knocking on her door. She opened it to find Dr. Chen standing there looking terrified and determined in equal measure. "I gave my statement to the FBI this morning," Chen said without preamble. "Told them everything. About the revised report, about the pressure to change my findings, all of it." "That must have been hard." "It was the easiest thing I've done in months." Chen's smile was shaky. "I'm probably going to lose my job. Maybe my whole career, but I can look at myself in the mirror again, so there's that. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing." "Yeah, well, we'll see if I still think that when I'm unemployed and being sued." Chen turned to leave, then stopped. "You know what's funny? I spent years building my career, making myself valuable, protecting my reputation. And in the end, none of it mattered as much as just telling the truth. Should have learned that earlier." After she left, Mara stood in her doorway looking out at Red Hollow. The town looked the same as it always had. Tired buildings, dusty streets, skies so big it hurt to look at. But something had shifted, something fundamental. They'd fought back. And they'd won. At least for now. The news trucks arrived by noon. CNN, local stations, even a crew from Phoenix. They set up on Main Street, cameras pointed at the burned-out husk of Mara's truck, reporters doing stand-ups about corporate corruption and small-town resistance. Mara watched from her apartment window and felt the surreal disconnect of seeing her life turned into a story that belonged to everyone now. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing. Lawyers offering to represent her pro bono, activists wanting to organize, journalists requesting interviews. She'd turned off the ringer around 10 and let it vibrate itself to death on the kitchen counter. "You should talk to them," Rosa said, bringing her coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. "Tell your side." "My side's already out there. In the documents, in the statements, what else is there to say?" "That you're not backing down, that Red Hollow won't be pushed around." Rosa set the mug down. that this matters. Mara took the coffee, drank it cold. Does it matter? Hale's arrested, but the company's still there. The mine's still approved, just delayed. We bought time, that's all. Time is something. Is it enough? Rosa didn't have an answer for that. By 2 in the afternoon, the FBI had finished processing the scene and towed away what was left of Mara's truck. The scorch marks on the asphalt remained, black and stark. Mara stood looking at them and thought about how close she'd come to being nothing more than a cautionary tale. Caleb found her there. He'd been at the reservation all morning, dealing with his own aftermath. The explosion had brought scrutiny to everyone involved, and Margaret was fielding questions from tribal leadership about Danny's role, about the break-in, about how much they'd known and when. They're calling it justified civil disobedience, Caleb said. Margaret's spinning it as concerned citizens uncovering corporate malfeasance. Lawyers think it'll stick. And you? What do you think? I think we got lucky. Could have gone a lot of different ways. He studied the burn marks on the pavement. Danny's being hailed as a hero on the res. Kids who wouldn't give him the time of day last week are treating him like he started a revolution. Did he? Maybe. Or maybe he just got caught up in something bigger than he understood and came out the other side by accident. Caleb's mouth twisted. Margaret wants me to come back to the reservation. Says the tribal council needs people who are willing to take risks, who understand what's at stake. Mara's stomach dropped. You're leaving. I don't know. She's offering me a position officially, cultural liaison, community organizer, something with a title and a salary. Real work, not just drifting. That's good. That's what you should do. Is it? You came here for your aunt, for your people. You did what she asked, more than she asked, and now they need you. Mara kept her voice level, didn't let it crack. You should go. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. What if I don't want to? Want doesn't always matter, doesn't it? Before Mara could answer, a car pulled up. Sheriff Brennan got out, looking older than he had a week ago. The swagger was gone, replaced by something that might have been shame. Mara, Caleb? He nodded at them both. Need to talk to you. About what? I already gave my statement. Not about that. About this. Brennan gestured around. About what happens next. They stood on the street while Brennan explained. The state attorney general was opening a formal investigation into Hale Extractive Industries. The mining permits were suspended pending environmental review. The county was launching its own inquiry into how the project had been approved so quickly with so little oversight. And me. Brennan's voice was rough. I'm being put on administrative leave while they investigate whether I was complicit in any of this, whether I knew about the threats against you and failed to act. Did you? Mara asked. Brennan met her eyes. I didn't know about the bomb. I swear I didn't. But the rest of it? The vandalism? The harassment? I looked the other way because it was easier. Because Hale had money and connections and you were just one woman making noise. He took off his hat, turned it in his hands. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really, I was just taking the easy road. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to hear it, and because I need to say it out loud. Brennan put his hat back on. I was wrong. About you. About all of it. Doesn't change anything, but there it is. He left without waiting for a response. Mara watched him drive away and felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. Sometimes that was enough to start with. The town meeting that night was nothing like the one before. No prepared speeches, no polished presentations, just people gathering to figure out what came next. The community center was packed again, but the energy was different, uncertain, hopeful, afraid. Bob Priestley stood at the podium looking lost. I'm not sure where to start. Start with the truth, someone called out. Start with what we do now. So they talked. For 3 hours they talked. About the mine, about the water, about what they wanted Red Hollow to be. The conversation was messy, people interrupting each other, old grievances surfacing alongside new concerns. But it was honest in a way the previous meeting hadn't been. Tom Hendricks stood up midway through. I've been thinking about what Mara said about the aquifer. My family's had the same well for 4 generations. My kids drink from it, my grandkids. If that water gets poisoned, we've got nothing. So what are you proposing? Someone asked. I'm proposing we don't let that happen. I'm proposing we fight to keep the mine out completely, not just delay it. That's not realistic, another voice said. The company has rights. They own the land. They own some of the land, Margaret said from the back of the room. She'd come with a delegation from the reservation, and people turned to look at her. But the aquifer doesn't respect property lines. The water belongs to all of us. The air, the land, they're connected. You poison one part, you poison the whole system. So what do we do? Linda Vasquez stood. How do we fight a company with unlimited money and lawyers? The same way we've been doing it, Mara said. She stood without planning to, words coming out before she could second-guess them. We document, we organize, we make noise. We don't let them operate in the shadows. That's easy to say when you're already the hero of this story, someone muttered. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who is too stubborn to give up and too angry to stay quiet. Mara looked around the room. But I can't do this alone. None of us can. If we want to protect this place, we have to do it together. Town and reservation. All of us. The room fell quiet. The divide between the two groups was still there. You could see it in how people sat, who talked to whom. Years of suspicion and prejudice didn't disappear because of one dramatic night, but something had cracked. A door had opened. I'll work with you, Tom said finally. If you're serious about this. Others joined in. Not everyone. Maybe not even half. But enough. Enough to matter. They formed a committee that night. Citizens for Water Protection, they called it. Mara didn't want to be on it. She'd done her part, said her piece, but they voted her in anyway, along with Margaret, Tom, Linda, and half a dozen others. Town and reservation, working together for the first time in anyone's memory. The next week was a blur of meetings and planning. They filed formal objections to the mining permits, hired their own environmental lawyers, reached out to state legislators. The work was tedious and frustrating and nothing like the dramatic confrontation at the town meeting. But it was necessary. Mara barely had time to think about the bakery. It stayed closed, boarded up, while she dealt with everything else. The insurance company was arguing about the truck, claiming the explosion was an act of terrorism and therefore not covered. Her savings were nearly gone. She was living on credit cards and the kindness of people who brought her casseroles and told her to stay strong. One morning, she walked downstairs to find the front door of the bakery open. She'd locked it. She always locked it. But there it was, standing wide. Her heart hammered as she stepped inside, looking for signs of another break-in. But nothing was disturbed. Instead, someone had left something on the counter, an envelope with her name on it. Inside was $10,000 in cash and a note in handwriting she didn't recognize. For the fight, keep going. Mara stood there holding the money, and for the first time in months she cried. Not from fear or anger or exhaustion, from the simple fact that someone had believed in what she was doing enough to help. Someone anonymous, someone who didn't want recognition or thanks, just wanted to contribute to something that mattered. She took the money to the bank, deposited it, and used half to pay her most urgent bills. The other half went into the committee's legal fund. When Tom asked where it came from, she just said, "A donation. That's all that matters." The bakery couldn't stay closed forever. Mara knew that. Bills didn't stop just because you were fighting the good fight. So 2 weeks after the explosion, she and Rosa and Caleb spent a day cleaning, repairing, getting ready to reopen. They'd just finished replacing the last window when a truck pulled up outside. Not a vandal this time. A delivery truck from a commercial kitchen supplier. The driver got out with a clipboard. "Delivery for Mara Cole?" "I didn't order anything." "Someone did. Paid in full." He opened the back of the truck. Inside was a new commercial oven. Top of the line, the kind Mara had been dreaming about for years but could never afford. The delivery slip said it was from Margaret Nez and the Tribal Council. A note attached read, "Every resistance needs bread. Keep feeding the people who fight." Mara looked at Caleb. "Did you know about this?" "Margaret doesn't tell me everything, but yeah, I might have mentioned your oven was on its last legs." They installed the new oven that afternoon. It gleamed in the kitchen, so modern and clean it made everything else look shabby. But it worked beautifully. The bakery reopened on a Saturday. Mara hadn't advertised, hadn't posted anything. She just unlocked the doors at 7 and started baking. By 8, there was a line down the block. People came from all over. Townspeople who'd stopped shopping there weeks ago. People from the reservation. Strangers who'd seen the news coverage and wanted to support her. They bought bread and pastries and coffee, and more than a few of them left donations in the jar Mara hadn't asked for, but Rosa had put out anyway. "This is insane," Rosa said, watching the crowd. "We don't have enough inventory for this." "Then we bake more." They baked all day. Caleb worked the front, managing the line with quiet efficiency. Mara and Rosa stayed in the back, turning out loaves as fast as the new oven could handle them. By closing time, they'd sold out completely and turned away at least 50 people. The register held more money than Mara had seen in 6 months. "People are going to think we're exploiting this," Rosa said, counting bills, "using the publicity to make money." "Let them think what they want. We're just doing what we've always done, making bread and selling it to people who want to buy it." Mara leaned against the counter, exhausted. "Besides, half of this is going to the legal fund." "Half? Mara, I need to keep fighting. We all do, and fighting costs money." The next morning, Mara woke to find someone had graffitied the side of her building, but instead of insults, it was a mural. Someone had painted her face, larger than life, with the words "Red Hollow Stands" underneath. She stood looking at it, coffee in hand, not sure how to feel. The painting wasn't great. Her nose was too big, her jaw too angular. But there was something fierce in the eyes, something determined. "You're famous," Caleb said, walking up with his own coffee. "I'm notorious. There's a difference." "Is there?" They drank their coffee in silence, watching the sun come up over the desert. Finally, Mara spoke. "Margaret offer you that job again?" 3 times this week. "You should take it. You've said that before." "I mean it. This is your chance to do something real, to be part of your community in a way that matters. You don't owe me anything." Caleb set down his cup. "What if I want to stay?" Want always matters, Mara. That's the whole point." He turned to face her. "I spent 10 years drifting because I didn't think I deserved to want anything. After my father died, after I screwed up, I convinced myself I was better off alone. That wanting things, wanting to belong somewhere, would just lead to more pain. And now? Now I'm tired of running. I'm tired of convincing myself I'm better off disconnected." He gestured at the bakery, at the mural, at the town waking up around them. "This place, it's broken and messy, and half the people here still don't trust me. But it's something, it's real, and I want to be part of it." Mara's throat tightened. "The reservation needs you." "The reservation has Margaret and Danny and a dozen others who are ready to fight. They'll be fine without me. But this?" He gestured between them. "This matters too, at least to me. I can't pay you much, probably less than Margaret's offering. I don't care about the money. You should. Money matters when you're trying to survive." "So does having a reason to survive." Caleb's voice was quiet. "Let me stay, Mara. Let me be part of this." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was being foolish, that he deserved better than a failing bakery and a woman who'd been too broken to see past her own survival for 3 years. But the truth was, she didn't want him to go. Hadn't wanted him to go since the moment he'd stepped between her and Hale's men. "All right," she said finally. "You can stay." The relief on his face was so open, so genuine, it made her chest ache. The storage shed burned 3 days later. Mara woke to someone pounding on her door at 2 a.m. She stumbled out of bed, pulled on a robe, opened the door to find Tom Hendricks standing there, soot on his face. "Your shed's on fire. Someone called it in, but by the time the fire department got here..." He shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mara." She ran downstairs in her nightgown and bare feet. The shed behind the bakery, where she stored flour, sugar, supplies, was engulfed. Flames 20 feet high, heat so intense she couldn't get within 30 yards. The volunteer fire department fought it for an hour, but there wasn't much to save. By the time the sun came up, the shed was gone. Nothing left but ash and twisted metal shelving. Sheriff Brennan was back on duty. The investigation had cleared him of direct complicity, though his reputation was permanently tarnished. He walked the scene with a fire investigator, examining what little evidence remained. "Accelerant," the investigator said. Someone poured gasoline along the base, lit it up. Security cameras? Brennan asked. Mara laughed bitterly. I can barely afford flour. You think I have security cameras? Fair point. Brennan looked at her. This is retaliation. For testifying, for the committee, all of it. You think? I know, and I'm going to find who did it. He met her eyes. I mean that. I'm going to find them. The community response was immediate. By noon, people started showing up. Not to gawk, but to help. They cleared debris, offered storage space for supplies, brought donations to replace what had been lost. Tom Hendricks organized a fundraiser. Linda Vasquez set up a collection at her store. And the reservation sent workers. Margaret showed up with a crew of 20 people. We're rebuilding it, she said. The shed, starting today. I can't afford... You're not paying for it. We are. Consider it an investment in the resistance. Margaret smiled grimly. Every movement needs a base of operations. Yours just happens to involve a lot of flour. They worked for a week. Town and reservation, side by side. The old divide didn't disappear. People still clustered with their own, still had moments of awkwardness and mistrust. But they showed up. Every day they showed up and worked. Caleb worked alongside them, and Mara watched the way people started to treat him differently. Not as an outsider or a threat, but as someone who belonged. Someone who'd earned his place through action, not words. The new shed went up in 5 days. Bigger than the old one, better built. On the 6th day, they held a small ceremony. Nothing formal, just people gathering to acknowledge what they'd accomplished together. Margaret spoke first. My grandmother used to say that the strongest structures are the ones built by many hands. Not because many hands make the work faster, but because many hands make the structure belong to everyone. This shed, this bakery, this fight we're in, it belongs to all of us now, and that makes it stronger than any one person could make it alone. Tom spoke next. I'll be honest. 3 months ago, if someone told me I'd be standing here with people from the reservation working together, I'd have called them crazy. I grew up being taught certain things about certain people, and those things were wrong. I'm learning that now, slowly, maybe too slowly, but I'm learning. Others spoke, some eloquent, some halting, all honest. When they asked Mara to say something, she almost refused, but then she looked at the shed, at the people who'd built it, and found words. I started this fight because I was angry, because I'd lost too much already, and I wasn't willing to lose anything else. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about me. It became about all of us, about what we could do when we stopped being afraid of each other and started being afraid of the right things. She paused. I don't know if we're going to win. The mine's still there, the company's still fighting back, but we're not alone anymore. And that means something. The applause was scattered but genuine. When it died down, people started to drift away, back to their lives, their jobs, their own struggles. But something had changed. Some barrier had cracked. That night, Mara sat in the new shed, breathing in the smell of fresh-cut wood. Caleb found her there. You okay? I was just thinking about Tommy, about what he'd make of all this. What do you think he'd say? Probably that I'm being reckless, that I'm risking everything for a fight I might not win. Mara smiled. But he'd also say he was proud of me, for trying. Caleb sat down beside her. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you too. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you stood up when everyone else sat down. I know you fight for what you believe in even when it costs you. I know you're stronger than you think you are. Mara turned to look at him. In the dim light, his features were soft, less guarded than usual. Why did you really stay? It wasn't just about the bakery or the fight. No, it wasn't. Then why? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Because for the first time in 10 years, I wanted to stop running. And you're the reason why. The words hung in the air between them. Mara knew she should say something, but her throat had closed up. Too many years of being alone, of protecting herself, of not letting anyone close enough to hurt her again. Caleb, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. He stood. I should go, early morning tomorrow. Wait. Mara stood too. I'm not good at this, at letting people in. After Tommy died, I shut down. It was easier than feeling everything. I understand. But I don't want to shut down anymore, and I don't want you to go. I'm not going anywhere. No, I mean right now. I mean right. I don't want you to leave right now. Understanding crossed his face. He stepped closer. Mara, I'm broken. I'm stubborn and angry. And I'm carrying so much grief I don't know how to put it down. If you stay, if this becomes something more, you need to know that. I know that. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking to be here. With you. However that looks. Mara reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and real. Okay, she whispered. Okay. They stood in the shed that had been built by a community learning to trust each other, holding hands in the darkness, and for the first time in 3 years, Mara felt like maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to want something beyond survival. Outside, Red Hollow slept. The fight wasn't over. The mine was still there, the company still dangerous. There would be more meetings, more battles, more losses. But tonight, in this moment, there was peace. And sometimes that was enough. Winter came to Red Hollow with unexpected gentleness. No dramatic storms, just a gradual cooling, mornings sharp enough to see your breath, nights that required extra blankets. Mara stood in the bakery kitchen at 5 in the morning, watching steam rise from the proving baskets, and thought about how much had changed in 3 months. The legal battles were grinding forward. Hale Extractive Industries had filed for bankruptcy protection, claiming the investigation and permit suspensions had made their operation financially unfeasible. Their lawyers were fighting on multiple fronts: federal environmental violations, fraud charges, attempted murder. Victor Hale himself was out on bail, facing years in prison if convicted. But the mine wasn't dead yet. The land rights still existed. The permits, though suspended, could theoretically be reinstated, and there were rumors that another company, smaller, quieter, but just as determined, was looking at acquiring Hale's assets. "We're not done," Margaret had said at last week's committee meeting. "We've won a battle. The war is still ahead of us." Mara knew she was right. But this morning, with bread rising and coffee brewing and dawn breaking over the desert, she let herself feel something close to contentment. Caleb came down the stairs from her apartment, hair still damp from the shower. They hadn't talked much about what had shifted between them that night in the shed. Hadn't put labels on it or made announcements. He just started staying, started keeping clothes in her closet, coffee mugs in her cabinet. Started being part of her life in a way that felt both terrifying and necessary. "Rosa's going to be late," he said, checking his phone. "Manuel's truck won't start. We can manage. Thursday's usually slow anyway." But Thursday wasn't slow. None of the days were slow anymore. The bakery had become something more than a business. It was a gathering place, a symbol, a small act of resistance baked into sourdough and cinnamon rolls. People came from 3 counties over to buy bread from that woman who stood up to the mining company. The attention embarrassed Mara, but it kept the lights on. By 7, they had a line. By 8, they'd sold half their inventory. Mara was boxing up an order of dinner rolls when the bell above the door chimed and Dr. Sarah Chen walked in. Mara hadn't seen her since the night before the town meeting. Chen looked different, thinner, tired, but somehow lighter, like she'd put down weight she'd been carrying for years. "Dr. Chen," Mara said, surprised. "Sarah, please. I think we're past formalities." Chen approached the counter, hands in her jacket pockets. "I wanted to talk to you if you have a minute." They sat at one of the small tables near the window. Caleb brought coffee without being asked, then retreated to give them privacy. "I lost my job," Sarah said without preamble. "Hale's company fired me the day after I testified. Breach of confidentiality, they called it. My lawyer says I've got a good wrongful termination case, but it'll take years to resolve. I'm sorry. Don't be. Best thing that ever happened to me." Sarah wrapped her hands around the coffee mug. "I've been offered a position with the EPA, investigating corporate environmental fraud. Turns out whistleblowers are in demand." "That's wonderful." "It is. But it means I'll be traveling a lot. Washington, field sites, wherever the cases take me." Sarah paused. "I won't be here. In Red Hollow, I mean. And I wanted to make sure you know that doesn't mean I'm abandoning the fight." "I never thought it did." "I also wanted to say thank you for having the courage I didn't, for doing what needed to be done even though it cost you." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. I spent years telling myself I was being smart, being professional. But really, I was just being a coward. You showed me the difference. I was just angry and stubborn. You were brave. There's a difference. Sarah stood. Anyway, I start the new job next month. But if you ever need an expert witness, technical analysis, anything, you call me. The fight's not over, and I want to be part of it, even from a distance. After she left, Mara sat with her cooling coffee and thought about the strange ways courage worked. How sometimes it was loud and dramatic, standing up at town meetings and facing down explosives, and sometimes it was quiet and private, walking away from a career you'd built because staying would mean compromising who you were. The weeks passed. December arrived with frost on the windows and Christmas lights strung across Main Street. The town council, newly elected after a contentious race that saw 3 incumbents lose their seats, approved funding for independent water testing. The results would take months, but it was something. Progress, however slow. Margaret came to town more often now. She and Mara had developed an unlikely friendship, 2 women from different worlds who'd been thrown together by necessity and discovered they actually liked each other. The tribal council wants to make a formal proposal, Margaret said one afternoon, sitting in the bakery after closing. A partnership between the reservation and Red Hollow. Shared water management, environmental monitoring, economic cooperation. How's that going over? About as well as you'd expect. Half the council thinks it's brilliant. The other half thinks we're being naive, that the town will betray us the first chance they get. Margaret smiled tiredly. 50 years of mistrust doesn't vanish overnight. But we're trying. That's more than we've ever done before. Tom Hendricks had become an unexpected ally in pushing the partnership forward. He'd taken heat for it, lost friends, lost business from people who thought he was being a traitor to his own kind. But he kept showing up to meetings, kept making the case. My grandfather used to tell stories about the Apache, he'd said at one meeting, about how they were savages, how they couldn't be trusted. I believed those stories my whole life, never questioned them, never thought about where they came from or why. He'd looked around the room. Turns out a lot of what I believed was just fear dressed up as fact, and I'm done living that way. It wasn't a perfect transformation. Tom still said things that made Margaret wince, still had blind spots and assumptions buried so deep he didn't recognize them. But he was trying. And in Red Hollow, trying was revolutionary. The holidays came and went. Mara baked more bread than she'd ever baked in her life. On Christmas Eve, she and Caleb and Rosa delivered loaves to people who couldn't afford to buy them, elderly residents on fixed incomes, families struggling with medical bills, anyone who needed help. It was something Tommy had always done, and continuing the tradition felt like honoring him without being crushed by his absence. On New Year's Eve, the bakery hosted a community gathering. Not a party, exactly, just people coming together to acknowledge what they'd survived and what still lay ahead. Mara hadn't planned to say anything, but Rosa pushed her toward the front of the room where someone had set up a microphone. I'm not good at speeches, Mara started, and people laughed. But I wanted to say something about this past year, about what we've accomplished. She looked around the room. Townspeople and reservation residents, not separated this time but mingled. Still awkward, still learning, but together. A year ago, I was alone, angry and scared and convinced I had to fight everything by myself. And then people started showing up. Some of you I'd known my whole life, some of you I'd never met. But you showed up. You stood with me when it was dangerous, when it was unpopular, when it would have been easier to stay home and stay quiet. Her voice caught, and she had to pause. Caleb was standing near the back, watching her with an expression that made her chest tight. We haven't won yet. The mine's still a threat. The company's still out there. We've got years of legal battles ahead of us. But we're not fighting alone anymore. We're not separate communities trying to survive on our own. We're something new, something I don't think Red Hollow has ever been before. She smiled. I don't know what to call it, but I'm grateful for it. The applause was warm. People came up afterward to shake her hand, to tell her their own stories of transformation. By midnight, when they counted down together and welcomed the new year, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. January brought news. The state attorney general announced formal charges against Victor Hale, fraud, environmental crimes, conspiracy to commit assault. The trial date was set for April, and the EPA announced it was opening its own investigation into Hale Extractive Industries operations nationwide, not just in Arizona. "They're making an example of him," Margaret said, reading the news on her phone. "Good. Maybe it'll make the next company think twice." But there was also news from the other direction. A corporate entity called Sentinel Mining Group filed paperwork expressing interest in acquiring Hale's mining rights. They sent representatives to meet with the county council, promised they'd be different, better, more responsible. "It's the same game," Caleb said after attending one of their presentations. "Different players, same rules. They'll say whatever they need to say to get the permits." "Then we fight them too," Mara said. "For how long? This could go on for years, decades." "Then it goes on. What else are we going to do? Give up?" Caleb looked at her. "No, I guess we don't." The tribal council invited Mara to speak at a gathering on the reservation. She'd never been there before, and the invitation made her nervous. "What am I supposed to say to them?" she asked Margaret. "The truth, that's all they want. The truth about what you saw, what you learned, why you fought." The gathering was in a community center that looked a lot like Red Hollow's. Worn floors, folding chairs, fluorescent lights that hummed. But the faces looking back at her were different, suspicious, waiting to see if she was genuine or just another white person using their struggle for her own purposes. Mara didn't try to hide her nervousness. "I'm going to be honest. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm not an expert on water rights or environmental law or Apache history. I'm just someone who owns a bakery and got mad about being lied to." A few people smiled at that. "But I learned something these past months. I learned that the things I thought were just my problems, my water, my land, my community, they're not separate from your problems. The aquifer doesn't stop at reservation boundaries. The pollution doesn't care about property lines. We're all connected whether we want to be or not." She talked for 20 minutes, telling the story of how she'd stumbled into this fight, how Caleb had shown up, how the town had slowly, painfully started to change. She didn't sugarcoat it, didn't pretend Red Hollow had undergone some miraculous transformation, but she also didn't hide what they'd managed to build together. When she finished, an older woman in the front row stood. "My name is Rita Nez. I'm Caleb's grandmother." Mara's stomach dropped. She'd heard about Rita, a respected elder, a woman who'd lived through the relocation programs and the boarding schools, and had every reason to distrust white people. "I want to thank you," Rita said, and Mara's surprise must have shown on her face because the older woman smiled. "Not just for fighting the mine, for seeing my grandson, for giving him a reason to stop running from who he is." "I didn't." "You did. Caleb's been lost since his father died, convinced he didn't deserve to belong anywhere. But you showed him different. That matters to his family, to all of us." After the gathering, Rita pulled Mara aside. "Caleb told me you and him are together now." Mara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "We haven't really put a label on it." "Don't need labels. I can see how he looks at you, how you look at him." Rita's dark eyes were sharp but kind. "You've both lost people, both carrying grief you think you have to carry alone. Maybe that's why you understand each other." "Maybe. You're good for him. And I think he's good for you too." Rita squeezed her hand. "Take care of each other. The fight ahead is long. You'll need that." February came with unseasonably warm weather. The committee met twice a week now, coordinating strategy for the Sentinel Mining Group Challenge. They'd hired lawyers, good ones, paid for by donations that kept coming in from across the country. The story of Red Hollow had spread farther than Mara had ever imagined. One morning, a film crew showed up asking to make a documentary. Mara said no. Then they offered to donate half the proceeds to the legal fund, and she said yes. "You're going to hate this," Rosa warned. "Cameras everywhere, people asking you the same questions over and over." "I already hate it, but we need the money." The filming took 3 weeks. They interviewed everyone: Mara, Caleb, Margaret, Tom, Dr. Chen via video call, even Danny, who treated it like the greatest adventure of his life. They filmed the bakery, the reservation, the scarred land where the mine would have been. They made Mara tell her story so many times she started to feel disconnected from it, like it had happened to someone else. But when the director showed her a rough cut, she understood why they'd been so thorough. The documentary wasn't just about the mine. It was about what happened when communities decided to fight back, about the cost of courage and the possibility of change. It was honest in a way that made Mara uncomfortable, showing her moments of doubt, her fear, the times she'd almost given up. People need to see this, the director said. Not the sanitized version where the hero always knows what to do. The real version, where you're scared and angry and doing it anyway. The documentary premiered at a film festival in March. It won awards, got picked up for distribution. Suddenly, Mara was doing interviews for national media, talking about environmental justice and corporate accountability and grassroots organizing. It was surreal and exhausting, and not at all what she'd signed up for when she'd posted that help wanted sign. "You're famous now," Caleb said one night, watching her on the evening news. "I'm not famous. I'm just loud." "There's a difference?" "Yes. Famous people want attention. I just wanted to keep my bakery." "And you did. Plus you accidentally started a movement." Mara threw a dish towel at him. The trial started in April. Mara attended when she could, sitting in the courtroom watching lawyers argue over technical details and legal precedents. Victor Hale sat at the defense table looking smaller than she remembered, diminished. Without his money and power to shield him, he was just a man who'd made bad choices and gotten caught. The prosecution built their case methodically. Dr. Chen testified, her expertise unassailable. Marcus Webb, the assistant who'd talked to Mara in the bar, testified about being pressured to hide findings. The security men who'd planted the bomb testified in exchange for reduced sentences, describing how Hale had ordered them to send a message and discredit the opposition. The defense tried to argue that Hale hadn't known about the bomb, that his employees had acted independently. But the paper trail was damning. Emails, text messages, recorded phone calls. Hale had known, had approved, had been willing to risk lives to protect his profits. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they came back, their verdict was unanimous on all counts. Guilty. Mara was in the bakery when she got the news. She sat down on the floor right there in the kitchen, surrounded by flour and dough, and cried. Not from happiness, exactly. From relief. From the simple fact that sometimes, just sometimes, the truth mattered, and justice happened, and the powerful faced consequences. Caleb found her there and sat down beside her, not saying anything, just being present. That was enough. Hale was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. His company was fined millions, forced to fund environmental remediation for all their sites. The mining rights in Red Hollow were forfeited, the land designated for environmental protection. The mine was finally, truly dead. The celebration that night was spontaneous. Someone started it at the bakery, and it spilled out into the street. People brought food, music, stories, town and reservation together, not perfectly integrated but genuinely mixed, dancing and laughing and acknowledging what they'd accomplished together. Margaret stood with Mara watching the crowd. "You know what comes next, right?" "What?" "Sentinel Mining Group is still out there, and a dozen companies like them. The fight doesn't end just because we won this round." "I know. You ready for that?" Mara thought about it. About the years ahead, the battles still to come. About the fact that protecting something you loved was never a one-time act, but a continuous choice. "Yeah," she said, "I think I am. But that was tomorrow's fight. Tonight was for celebrating." Caleb found her around midnight, pulled her away from the crowd to the quiet street behind the bakery. Above them, stars scattered across the desert sky, infinite and bright. "I've been thinking," he said. "That's dangerous. I want to make this official. Us, I mean." Mara's heart stuttered. "Caleb, not marriage. I know that's too fast, too much. But I want to stop pretending this is temporary. I want to build something with you, a life, a future, whatever that looks like. I'm a mess. I've got trauma and debt and a failing business that only survives because people are buying symbolic bread. I've got my own trauma, my own mistakes. Doesn't change what I want. What if I can't be what you need? You already are." Caleb took her hands. "You're stubborn and fierce, and you don't give up on things that matter. You fight for what you believe in, even when it's terrifying. And you've taught me that running from pain doesn't make it hurt less. It just makes you alone with it. Mara looked at him. This man who'd walked into her bakery as a stranger and somehow become essential. I'm still scared. So am I. We can be scared together. She kissed him then, there in the starlight with celebration echoing from the street beyond. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. They both had too much history, too many scars. But it was real, and real was better. The months after the trial brought changes. The partnership between Red Hollow and the reservation moved forward, slowly but genuinely. Shared water testing, joint economic development, cultural exchange programs. It was messy and complicated, and sometimes people said things that hurt each other, but they kept showing up, kept trying. The bakery thrived in a way it hadn't since Tommy died. Mara hired 2 more employees, one from town, one from the reservation. She taught them the recipes her grandmother had taught her, the techniques passed down through generations, the work of keeping traditions alive while building something new. Caleb took a position splitting time between the bakery and the reservation, working as a liaison between the communities. He wasn't comfortable with the title or the attention, but he was good at it. Good at listening, at finding common ground, at helping people see past their assumptions. Danny finished his GED and enrolled in community college, studying environmental science. Someone's got to keep fighting when you old people get tired, he said, grinning. Margaret announced she was running for tribal chair. Someone's got to make sure we don't backslide, she said. Might as well be me. Dr. Chen's EPA investigations led to charges against 3 more mining companies. She called Mara sometimes late at night to talk about the cases she was building. They'd become friends, these 2 women who'd both found courage in unexpected places. Rosa and Manuel celebrated their 40th anniversary. The party was held in the bakery, and Rosa cried when Mara surprised her with a cake that had taken 3 days to decorate. You're like a daughter to me, Rosa said, hugging her. You and Tommy both. I'm so proud of what you've built here. We built it, Mara corrected. All of us. Summer arrived with heat that shimmered off the asphalt. Mara stood in the bakery early one morning, watching bread rise, and thought about how far she'd come from that desperate woman who'd posted a help-wanted sign. She'd been so afraid then, afraid of losing everything, afraid of being alone, afraid her life would never be more than survival. And she had lost things, her truck, her shed, her sense of safety. But she'd gained more than she'd lost. Community, purpose, love. The bell above the door chimed. Caleb came in with coffee and the morning paper. You're in the news again, he said. What now? Feature article about the documentary says it's inspired similar fights across the country, 14 communities using your story as a template for challenging corporate environmental abuse. Mara took the paper, scanned the article. It was surreal seeing her name, her story, held up as some kind of blueprint. She was just a woman who'd been too stubborn to quit. You changed things, Caleb said, reading her expression. You need to accept that. We changed things. It wasn't just me. No, but you started it. That matters. Maybe it did. Mara was still learning to accept that her choices had ripple effects, that individual courage could spark collective action. It was a lot to carry, but she wasn't carrying it alone. That afternoon, the committee met to discuss long-term strategy. Sentinel Mining Group had finally withdrawn their interest, but there would be others. There always were. So they planned, created monitoring systems, established legal frameworks, built relationships with state and federal agencies. This is the work now, Margaret said. Not dramatic confrontations, just steady, persistent vigilance. Making sure what we won doesn't get taken back when people stop paying attention. How long do we keep doing this? Someone asked. Forever, Margaret said simply, or until protecting the water becomes so fundamental that nobody questions it anymore. Whichever comes first. Forever. It should have been daunting, but Mara found it strangely comforting, having a purpose that extended beyond immediate survival, being part of something larger than herself. Evening fell, and Mara walked home through streets that felt different than they had a year ago. Not perfect. Red Hollow still had its problems: poverty, addiction, the quiet desperation of a town that had been dying for decades. But there was something else now, too. A sense of possibility. The knowledge that change was possible if people were willing to fight for it. She found Caleb on the roof of the bakery. He'd discovered the access ladder months ago and sometimes went up there to think. Mara climbed up and sat beside him. "What are you doing up here?" "Watching the sunset, thinking." "About?" "About how strange life is. A year ago, I was drifting. No home, no purpose, just moving from place to place trying to outrun my own mistakes. And now I'm here, with you, part of something that matters." "Any regrets?" "None." He turned to look at her. "You?" Mara thought about Tommy, about the life she'd planned that had been cut short, about the loneliness and fear that had defined her existence for 3 years, about the choice she'd made to fight instead of fold, and everything that had come from that choice. "No," she said. "No regrets." They sat together as the sun dropped below the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and red and gold. Somewhere in the bakery below them, dough was rising for tomorrow's bread. In the town beyond, people were living their lives, fighting their own battles, building their own futures. And on the reservation, Margaret was probably already planning the next campaign, the next fight, the next step forward. The work would continue. It always would. But tonight, there was peace. Mara leaned against Caleb, felt his arm come around her shoulders, and let herself believe in the future they were building. Not a perfect future, nothing ever was, but a good one, a real one. A future where courage mattered and community was possible and love could grow even in the hardest soil. Below them, Red Hollow stretched out under the emerging stars. A small town in the middle of nowhere, still struggling, still fighting, but not alone, never alone again. And in the bakery kitchen, where 3 generations of women had turned flour into sustenance, where desperation had sparked resistance, where fear had given way to hope, tomorrow's bread was already beginning to rise.